When I opened the front door and saw the papers in his hand, my stomach dropped like I'd swallowed a stone. "Mom," my daughter whispered behind me, clutching her worn-out backpack, her eyes wide and scared. My uncle, the man I had once trusted more than anyone in this world, stood there with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It had been years since my husband passed, years since I had learned to pour my love into Lily without him. We were just the two of us then, my tiny apartment smelling of fresh-baked bread on Saturday mornings, her laughter filling every corner. I worked as a librarian, slowly saving every penny for Lily's college fund, dreaming of the day she'd walk across that stage in a cap and gown. My uncle had come shortly after my husband's funeral, offering help I desperately needed. "I'll stay for a while," he said. "We'll get through this together." And I let him in, welcomed him into our lives like family should. He fixed the squeaky hinges, helped with Lily's homework, even tucked her in at night when I worked late shifts. At first, it felt like a reprieve, a kindness I hadn't known I needed. But kindness, I was about to learn, sometimes wears a mask that hides a very different face. The rain tapped against the window that evening, a soft, relentless rhythm. And I had no idea that the storm I felt in my chest was only just beginning. Life with just Lily and me was quiet, ordinary, but it had a rhythm that I cherished. Mornings smelled of toast and coffee, Lily's tiny shoes tapping on the linoleum as she dashed out to catch the bus. Evenings were softer, homework sprawled across the kitchen table, the scent of simmering soup drifting from the stove, and her soft humming as she curled up on the couch with a blanket. It was a life stitched together from small, ordinary joys, a patchwork of love that felt fragile but real. When my uncle moved in, I thought it was a gift. He promised to help with bills, to take some of the weight off my shoulders. And for a while, he did. He made her laugh in ways only a family member could, reading bedtime stories with exaggerated voices and tickling her until she squealed. I admit, it was comforting, a reprieve from the loneliness that had wrapped around us since my husband died. I trusted him with every detail of our lives, the bills, the accounts, even my little plans for Lily's future. He never once complained, never asked for anything in return. At least, that's what I believed. And so, our days fell into a gentle cadence. The laundry, the library shifts, Lily's piano lessons, life felt steady again. I allowed myself to breathe, to feel some semblance of hope. But hope, as I would learn, can sometimes make you blind to the shadows lurking just behind the light. It started small. At first, it was just the way he lingered over the bills, flipping through them with a half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'd hand him the statements for Lily's college fund, and he'd nod, muttering something about handling it. I didn't think much of it, after all, I had welcomed him into our home, trusted him with our lives. But then the little things began to gnaw at the edges of my peace. He'd brush off questions about expenses, shift conversations when I mentioned savings, or distract me with stories that made me laugh and forget to check the accounts. One night, I noticed a blank check lying on the counter with my signature scrawled across it. I asked about it. He laughed, light and casual, saying, "Just some paperwork for the investments. Don't worry your pretty little head." But I did worry. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Even Lily noticed. She'd whisper to me in the kitchen, "Mom, Uncle seems different." Her small hand clutching mine made my stomach twist. I wanted to believe she was imagining it, that my grief and exhaustion were making me paranoid. But the unease settled deep in my bones, a chill that I couldn't shake. I began to watch him more closely, timing his calls, noting the little lies that fell out between sentences. There were no fireworks, no confrontations, just subtle moments, the ones that prick at your skin and make your heart race without explanation. And yet, every time I tried to confront him, he'd smile that same comforting smile, and I'd falter. Sometimes, trust is the heaviest weight a person can carry, and I was beginning to feel the strain. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where sunlight slanted through the blinds in golden stripes across the living room carpet. I had returned early from the library, my mind buzzing with overdue notices and whispered apologies to students I hadn't had time to help. The apartment felt too quiet, Lily was at school, and my uncle was nowhere to be seen. That's when I noticed the envelope, thick and heavy, lying on the dining table. My name was on it, written in my uncle's careful hand. Something about it made my chest tighten. I opened it, and my heart broke in slow motion. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, transfer notices, every penny I had saved for Lily's college, drained. Every careful plan I had made, vanished. And worse, there were legal documents giving him control over her schooling and finances, signed with my name. I remember trembling, clutching the envelope, my nails biting into my palms. My voice shook when I called him. Why? How could you? He looked at me, calm, measured, as though he were disappointed in my inability to understand the necessity of it all. I've been helping, he said softly. For her own good. You're too tired, too weak. I just took care of it. Tears blurred my vision. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak all collided in a storm that felt like it would never end. Lily came home then, backpack slung over her shoulder, unaware that her mother's world had cracked open in her absence. I hugged her tightly, silently promising her that I would protect her, even if it meant standing up to the man I had once loved as family. That day, the warmth of our home turned cold. I realized that the one I had trusted the most was the one who had betrayed us. And for the first time, I understood that family can sometimes hurt deeper than strangers ever could. I remember pacing the apartment that night, Lily asleep in her room, the hum of the radiator filling the silence. My hands shook, not just from anger, but from the enormity of what had been done. Every plan I had for my daughter's future, every careful penny I had tucked away, gone. And the man who had promised to protect us, the man I had trusted with my grief, had taken it all. I called a lawyer the next morning. I don't remember the exact words, only the sharp, steady ones that came out of my mouth, fueled by a mixture of fear and determination. He's stolen from us. I need to fight. I need my daughter back. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but I felt a flicker of hope. Someone else saw the injustice the way I did. Confronting my uncle was harder. I had rehearsed my words, lined them up like soldiers ready for battle. You have no right, I said, voice barely above a whisper, but laced with steel. This ends now. Lily is my daughter, and I will not let you keep her from me, or her future. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just smiled faintly, as if I were being dramatic. You'll understand someday, he said. But I knew, in that moment, that I already understood more than I ever wanted to. The weeks that followed were a blur of court dates, signed papers, and meetings with lawyers. I kept Lily close, telling her, softly, that everything would be all right, even as my heart broke at the thought of her having been betrayed by someone she loved. I discovered small victories first, access to her school records, a temporary freeze on his control over her finances. Every tiny step was a lifeline, pulling us back from the edge. In the quiet of those nights, after the paperwork was stacked and filed, I would sit in Lily's room, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, and whisper, "I've got you, always. No one can take you from me again." Word spread slowly, first to a few close friends and neighbors, and then, inevitably, through the wider circle of family and community. People were shocked. My uncle, the calm, helpful man who had been part of our home, now revealed as the one who had drained our savings and tried to take my daughter away. The whispers followed me through the library, over cups of coffee at the corner diner. Even in the grocery store where Lily and I shopped for bread and milk. Some offered sympathy, others judgment, and a few dared to question my ability to manage on my own. But I held my head high. I had something far more powerful than their opinions, the truth. I had the evidence, the court documents, and most importantly, Lily by my side. The courtroom became a different kind of stage. I stood there, voice steady, recounting every betrayal, every lie, every stolen penny. My uncle sat across from me, expression calm, almost smug, as if the walls themselves would shield him from judgment. But they didn't. Each word I spoke, each piece of proof laid bare, chipped away at the mask he had worn for years. By the end of the proceedings, the judge ruled in our favor. Lily was returned fully into my custody, the stolen funds reinstated for her education, and my uncle's access severed. Relief washed over me, sharp and overwhelming, and yet, it was tinged with sorrow. The betrayal of someone I had loved so deeply could not be erased. Even in the aftermath, there were conversations to be had with family members who struggled to reconcile the man. They thought they knew with the one who had caused so much harm. But slowly, the story I had lived, the truth I had fought to uphold, became a lesson, for them, for me, and, one day, for Lily. As we walked home that evening, hand in hand, the winter sun glinting off the sidewalks, I felt a fragile sense of peace settle into my chest. We were battered, yes, but we were together, and together, we would rebuild. The weeks after the court decision felt surreal, like stepping out into sunlight after months of storm. The apartment, once heavy with tension and betrayal, began to smell like home again, the faint scent of Lily's crayons mixed with the warmth of soup on the stove. We spent mornings slowly, reading together at the table, letting our voices and laughter fill spaces that had been empty for too long. Lily's trust in me had been tested, and I worked each day to rebuild it. I listened more than I spoke, letting her tell me what she felt, never brushing aside the anger or confusion in her eyes. We went through our old photographs, her baby shoes, the handmade birthday cards from years past, small relics that reminded us of what had endured, even through betrayal. I also learned to forgive in a quiet, measured way, not to absolve my uncle, not to forget, but to release the anger that had weighed me down. Each time I thought of the stolen savings, each time I remembered his calm, manipulative smile, I would breathe deeply and remind myself that healing was not about him. It was about us, about Lily's laughter, her future, our shared mornings. The simple act of waking up and facing the world together. And so we began to rebuild, brick by brick. College plans were restored, life rhythms returned, and though scars remained, the faint ache of betrayal, the memory of fear, there was also gratitude for the chance to protect my daughter, for the strength I never knew I had, and for the quiet, unshakable bond between us. We were whole again, not because the past was erased, but because we chose to grow beyond it. Sitting by the window that evening, the rain soft against the glass, I watched Lily laugh as she flipped through her school workbook. It struck me how resilient a child can be when they are loved, how much a mother's heart can endure and still beat with hope. We had walked through a storm of betrayal, faced a darkness I never imagined, and yet here we were, together, unbroken. I've learned that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, though it takes patience, courage, and a quiet strength you didn't know you had. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Nor does it mean you have to welcome someone back into your life. It simply means freeing your own heart so it can heal. Lily and I are not defined by the hands that tried to take from us, but by the hands we hold and the love we nurture every single day. And my dear ones, I ask you this, if you were in my shoes, would you have found the strength to fight, to forgive, and to rebuild? Tell me in the comments, my dear, what would your heart have done? If this story touched you, if it stirred a memory or reminded you of someone you love, subscribe and join me here again. There are more stories of family, resilience, and hope waiting to be shared, and I want you to hear them.